Long before cities breathed smoke into the sky, before kings wore crowns or armies marched, there were horses. Not the powerful war horses of legend, nor racing champions draped in silk, nor steady farm companions pulling plows. Just small, quiet creatures, grazing under a vast and ancient sky. This is where our story begins. Around 55 million years ago, in a warm, humid age with vast forests, you wouldn't recognize the earliest horse. No taller than a fox, with multiple toes instead of hooves, it moved softly, nibbling leaves, hiding from predators. These early horses lived in forests, not open plains. They darted and weaved, surviving quietly. Unlike horses today, over millions of years, the world changed. Forests thinned, grasslands spread, and the climate cooled. Horses changed with it. Legs grew longer, bodies stronger, toes fused into a single hoof, teeth hardened to grind tough grasses. Nature shaped them into runners. Open plains rewarded speed. The faster you ran, the longer you lived. Around 2 million years ago, horses looked much more familiar. Strong-bodied, long-maned, and swift. They spread across continents, moving between lands connected by ice bridges, roaming vast territories across Eurasia and the Americas. They were prey animals, always alert and ready to flee. Humans did not yet ride them. Early humans hunted them. Ancient hunters tracked herds across windswept plains. Horses provided meat, hides, and bones for tools, a source of survival. Cave paintings whisper of this time. Outlines of horses etched by flickering firelight. Humans were captivated by their power. But the relationship was simple. Hunter and hunted. That would not last forever. Fast forward to about 5,500 years ago. On the vast grasslands known as the steppe in Central Asia. Life here was harsh. Winters were bitter, summers dry. Distances were immense. People survived by herding animals. And among those animals, horses. At first, horses were likely just another source of meat. But something changed. Humans began to notice something extraordinary. Horses were not just food. They were strong. They were fast. And perhaps, they could carry weight. Archaeological evidence suggests people in these regions were among the first to domesticate horses. They may have begun by milking them, by corralling them, by managing herds. Then, eventually, someone tried something bold. They climbed onto a horse's back. We don't know who that first rider was. But that moment, that small act of balance and courage, may have been one of the most important turning points in human history. Early riding was likely simple and awkward. No saddles, no stirrups, no metal bits, just hands gripping mane, legs pressing tight. But even in its simplest form, riding changed everything. Suddenly, distance shrank. What once took days on foot could be traveled in hours. Herders could manage larger territories. Hunters could chase prey farther and faster. Communication between settlements sped up. The world became smaller, and humans became more powerful. Horses did not just carry people. They carried ideas. Once humans realized the power of mounted travel, innovation followed. Simple bridles were developed to guide horses. Selective breeding encouraged traits like stamina, temperament, and strength. Communities that mastered horsemanship gained advantages over those who did not. On the open steppe, mobility was survival. But mobility also meant expansion. Mounted groups could migrate rapidly. They could trade across long distances. They could defend territory or conquer it. And so the horse became more than a partner. It became a force multiplier. Around 4,000 years ago, another transformation occurred. Humans harnessed horses not just for riding, but for pulling vehicles. The chariot was born. Lightweight, wheeled, often built for speed, it revolutionized warfare and ceremony. Pulled by teams of trained horses, chariots thundered across battlefields. Armies that used them held enormous tactical advantages. In many early civilizations, the chariot became a symbol of elite status. Warriors, rulers, and nobles rode in them. The horse was no longer just useful. It was prestigious. It symbolized power. And humanity was only beginning to understand how deeply horses would shape civilization. As centuries passed, horses spread through trade and conquest. They reached regions where they had once gone extinct. In some places, they arrived as gifts. In others, as instruments of war. Mounted warriors could cover extraordinary distances. Empires expanded along routes impossible without horses. Messengers galloped between cities carrying news, laws, and orders. Trade networks flourished. Cultural exchange accelerated. The rhythm of hooves echoed through history. And yet, horses were not merely tools of conquest. They were companions. Nomadic cultures formed deep bonds with their horses. A rider might depend on one animal for survival in brutal winters. Horses provided milk, transport, warmth, and status. In many societies, horses were buried alongside their owners, honored even in death. The partnership had grown intimate. Human and horse were learning to move as one. It's easy to focus on the practical impact of horses: speed, agriculture, warfare. But something quieter was happening too. Horses are sensitive animals. They read body language. They respond to tone. They remember treatment. Early riders must have learned quickly that force alone was not enough. Trust mattered. Over time, training methods evolved. Some were harsh, others surprisingly gentle. The best riders understood something simple. A frightened horse runs. A trusted horse carries you anywhere. This emotional partnership deepened the connection between species, and it changed humans as well. Patience, timing, awareness, cooperation. Riding a horse requires balance, not just physical, but relational. Perhaps, in learning to guide horses, humans learned something about guiding themselves. There is a strange twist in the story. Though horses evolved in North America millions of years ago, they disappeared there around 10,000 years ago, likely due to climate changes and human hunting. For thousands of years, the Americas had no horses. Then, much later, they returned. But that is a story for another batch. By the time ancient civilizations flourished across Eurasia and North Africa, horses were woven into daily life. They plowed fields, they turned mills, they carried soldiers, they transported goods, they delivered messages, they shaped trade routes, they influenced where cities grew and how borders shifted. Without horses, many early societies would have developed more slowly. Communication would have lagged. Agriculture would have required more human labor. Warfare would have looked entirely different. The horse accelerated history, literally. Imagine, for a moment, a quiet evening thousands of years ago. A rider dismounts after a long journey. The horse lowers its head to graze. The wind moves softly through tall grass. No engines hum. No electric lights glow. Just breaths, hooves, stars. In that silence, the bond between species feels simple. One creature strong and swift, the other clever and ambitious. Together, they reshape the world. And this is only the beginning. In the next batch, we'll explore how horses transformed warfare in the ancient world, the return of horses to the Americas, the rise of mounted knights and armored cavalry, how trade empires depended on relay horse systems, and how the sound of hooves became the soundtrack of civilization. The plains are no longer quiet. The partnership between horse and human has matured. What began as cautious riding on open grasslands is now something sharper, louder, and far more consequential. The age of mounted power has arrived, and the world will never move the same way again. The chariot kings of the ancient world. Around 2000 BCE, chariots spread across the ancient world with astonishing speed. From the kingdoms of Mesopotamia to the river valleys of Egypt, the light, horse-drawn chariot became the ultimate symbol of authority. In Egypt, pharaohs stood tall in racing chariots, bows drawn, reins wrapped around their waists. The horse gave rulers mobility and spectacle. One of the most famous chariot battles occurred at the Battle of Kadesh between Egyptian forces and the Hittite Empire. Thousands of chariots clashed in clouds of dust and bronze. Before horses, warfare moved at the pace of marching feet. With horses, war moved like lightning. Chariots allowed swift flanking maneuvers, rapid pursuit of retreating enemies, elite warrior classes to dominate battlefields. The horse transformed not just tactics, but social hierarchy. Only the wealthy could afford to maintain horses and chariots. Power increasingly rested in the hands of those who controlled them. Speed became strategy. The rise of mounted cavalry. Eventually, warriors discovered something even more effective than chariots: riding directly into battle. Mounted cavalry began replacing chariots because riders were more flexible. They could navigate rough terrain, pivot quickly, and operate independently. The mounted archer became especially formidable. Few groups mastered this art like the nomadic tribes of the Eurasian steppe. These riders could fire arrows accurately at full gallop, retreat while shooting backward, survive entirely on horseback for long stretches. Their mobility baffled settled armies. Empires struggled to defend against enemies who could appear suddenly and disappear just as quickly. Horses turned the open plains into highways of conquest. The Persian relay, communication at horse speed. In the vast empire ruled by Cyrus the Great, distance was a serious problem. The territory stretched across thousands of miles, but the Persians built an astonishing solution: a relay system of mounted messengers. This network, later known as the Royal Road, allowed messages to travel with incredible speed for its time. Riders would gallop between stations, switching horses at each stop. The Greek historian Herodotus famously described it: "Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers. With horses, information could move faster than ever before. Laws, orders, warnings, news, governments could function across massive territories. Without horses, large, centralized empires might never have held together." The Greeks and the horse. In ancient Greece, horses became symbols of wealth and nobility. Mounted warriors, called hippais, held elite status. Even the word hippodrome reveals how deeply horses entered cultural life. But Greek terrain was rocky and mountainous, limiting large-scale cavalry dominance. Elsewhere, horses would play a far more decisive role: the return of horses to the Americas. Now, we cross oceans. Thousands of years after horses disappeared from North America, they returned in the 15th and 16th centuries. Spanish explorers brought them when Hernan Cortes arrived in the Americas in 1519. Indigenous peoples had never seen horses before. Accounts describe the awe and fear they inspired. A mounted rider appeared almost supernatural. Man and animal fused into one towering creature. But something unexpected happened. Some horses escaped, and Native American tribes quickly learned to ride. Few cultures adapted as brilliantly as the Comanche. The Comanche became extraordinary horsemen, transforming their society around mobility, buffalo hunting, and mounted warfare. Within generations, horses reshaped the Great Plains. They altered hunting patterns. They shifted power balances between tribes. They expanded trade networks. In a twist of fate, horses had come home, and they would change the continent once more. Rome, hooves beneath the empire. The Roman Empire relied heavily on infantry, but cavalry still played vital roles. Mounted scouts gathered intelligence. Messengers carried commands across provinces. Auxiliary cavalry units provided speed and flexibility. Road systems, engineered with astonishing precision, allowed horses to travel efficiently between cities. The empire's durability depended partly on mounted communication. Without horses, Rome's administrative reach would have fractured. The Age of Knights. Now we enter medieval Europe. Fields of armored warriors mounted on massive warhorses dominate the imagination. The medieval knight was inseparable from his horse. These horses, often called destriers, were bred for strength and courage. They carried heavily armored riders into direct collision with enemy lines. The thunder of a cavalry charge was terrifying. A line of knights could shatter infantry formations through sheer momentum. Feudal systems even revolved around horse ownership. Land was granted in exchange for mounted military service. The horse was not just a tool, it was infrastructure for the entire social order. Stirrups, a small invention, a huge impact. One simple invention amplified mounted warfare dramatically. The stirrup, by stabilizing riders. Stirrups allowed warriors to stand in the saddle, deliver powerful lance strikes, and remain secure during impact. Historians debate just how transformative stirrups were, but their spread across Eurasia coincided with the rise of heavy cavalry dominance. Sometimes, world-changing revolutions are small enough to fit beneath your foot. The Mongol storm. Few empires demonstrate the power of horses more dramatically than that of Genghis Khan. The Mongol Empire expanded across Asia and into Europe with astonishing speed in the 13th century. Mongol riders often traveled with multiple horses per warrior, switching mounts to maintain endurance. They could cover extraordinary distances, sometimes over 100 miles in a day. Their tactics relied on mobility, coordination, and mounted archery. Cities fell not just to force, but to speed. The Mongol postal relay system, known as the Yam, allowed communication across thousands of miles faster than any empire before it. Horses made continental governance possible. Without them, the Mongol Empire would have been unimaginable. Trade on horseback, beyond war and empire, horses shaped commerce. Caravans crossed the Silk Road. Mounted traders carried spices, silk, metalwork, and ideas between East and West. Diseases traveled too, including the plague. When we speak of globalization's early roots, we often forget the animal that carried it forward. Horses were engines of exchange, agriculture, and daily labor. Not all revolutions are dramatic. In villages across Europe, Asia, and North Africa, horses quietly improved agriculture. Compared to oxen, horses were faster and more efficient for certain types of plowing and hauling. The horse collar, another seemingly small invention, allowed animals to pull heavy loads without choking. Food production increased, populations grew, towns expanded. The horse did not just win battles. It fed civilizations. The emotional cost of war. As horses carried humans into battle after battle, they also suffered alongside them. They were wounded. They were exhausted. They were frightened. Historical accounts speak of war horses trained to ignore chaos, yet still sensitive to their riders' tension. Thousands upon thousands of horses died in conflicts across centuries. Their contribution was enormous and often unrecorded. Behind every empire's rise was the quiet labor of hooves. The world moves faster. By the late medieval period, horses were essential to postal systems, trade caravans, farming communities, military campaigns, ceremonial processions, exploration missions. If you removed horses from the equation, history would slow dramatically. Borders would shift differently. Empires would shrink. Cultures might remain isolated longer. The horse was not just an animal. It was acceleration embodied. And yet, another transformation was approaching. Gunpowder would change battlefields. Ships would cross oceans. Machines would begin to stir. In the next batch, we will explore the age of exploration and colonial expansion. Horses in the New World frontier. The Industrial Revolution's challenge to horsepower. The cavalry's last great charges. And the beginning of the end of horse-powered civilization. The sound of hooves still echoes across continents, but something new is stirring. Smoke, steel, gunpowder. The world is about to change again, and horses will carry humanity straight into the storm, across the ocean, conquest and collision. When Spanish ships crossed the Atlantic in the late 15th century, they did not come alone. On board were animals unfamiliar to the Americas, cattle, pigs, and most dramatically, horses. When Christopher Columbus sailed in 1492, horses were not yet central to his voyages. But soon after, Spanish expeditions brought them in larger numbers. By the time Hernan Cortes marched into the Aztec Empire, mounted soldiers were part of the invasion force. To indigenous communities who had never seen a horse, the sight was overwhelming. A mounted rider appeared fused to the animal, taller, faster, terrifying. But fear did not last forever. Horses escaped captivity. They bred in the wild. They spread across plains and deserts, and Native American nations adapted with remarkable speed. The horse nations of the plains. Within generations, buffalo hunting became mounted and vastly more efficient. Trade networks expanded dramatically. Warfare strategies evolved around speed and maneuverability. The Comanche, in particular, became legendary horse breeders and riders. Spanish colonists, who once introduced horses, now faced indigenous cavalry who could outride and outfight them. Horses reshaped social structures. Wealth was measured in herds. Raiding cultures intensified. Mobility defined power. On the plains, the horse was not just transportation. It was identity, the age of exploration and empire. As European empires expanded across Africa, Asia, and the Americas, horses traveled with them. They pulled cannons, they carried officers, they delivered orders between colonies. In places like India, long traditions of horsemanship blended with European cavalry tactics. The British East India Company relied heavily on mounted units to patrol and control vast territories. Empires moved at the pace of hooves, but something new was emerging in Europe that would eventually challenge the horse's dominance. Steam, the industrial whisper. The Industrial Revolution began quietly in the 18th century. At first, horses remained essential. They hauled coal from mines. They pulled barges along canals. They dragged carriages through crowded city streets. Urban life depended on horsepower, quite literally. In cities like London and New York City, thousands upon thousands of horses worked daily. But steam engines were improving. Railways expanded. And trains could move goods and people faster than any horse team. For the first time in thousands of years, the horse had competition. Napoleon and the Grand Cavalry. Few leaders understood the power of mobility like Napoleon Bonaparte. His armies moved quickly across Europe, supported by massive cavalry divisions. Mounted scouts gathered intelligence. Cavalry charges shattered weakened lines. Supply chains relied on thousands of horses. Napoleon himself was rarely seen without a horse beneath him. Yet even during his campaigns, artillery and firearms were becoming deadlier. The American Civil War, speed meets industry. By the mid-19th century, warfare was caught between two eras. During the American Civil War, horses remained central. Cavalry units scouted enemy positions. Mounted officers directed troop movements. Supply wagons rolled behind armies. Cattle drives across Texas and into Kansas depended entirely on mounted labor. The American West was built on horseback. Lawmen, outlaws, ranchers all relied on horses for survival and livelihood. Yet even here, change was coming. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869 symbolized a turning point. Steel tracks began replacing dusty trails. The rhythm of hooves was gradually drowned out by the whistle of locomotives, the last great cavalry charges. Despite technological advances, horses remained part of military strategy into the 20th century. At the outbreak of World War I, European armies still fielded large cavalry units. Many believed mounted charges would break enemy lines as they had for centuries. But machine guns changed everything. Barbed wire and trench warfare rendered traditional cavalry attacks devastatingly ineffective. Horses still served, pulling artillery, transporting supplies, carrying the wounded, but their role had fundamentally shifted. Millions of horses died during World War I. Their loss marked the end of an era that had lasted thousands of years. In World War II, horses were still used in certain terrains, especially by Germany and the Soviet Union for logistics. But tanks had replaced war horses. Engines had replaced muscle. Cities without hooves. By the early 20th century, automobiles filled streets once dominated by carriage horses. In places like Paris and New York, traffic patterns transformed within decades. Horse manure, once a major urban sanitation problem, disappeared. Stables gave way to garages. Blacksmiths retrained as mechanics. For the first time in human history, daily life in many cities no longer depended on horses. The world had accelerated beyond them. The emotional transition. For thousands of years, horses had been woven into human rhythm. Morning chores, military marches, evening rides, trade caravans under starlight. Suddenly, that intimate reliance faded. Horses moved from necessity to choice, from infrastructure to recreation. And yet, the bond did not disappear. It evolved from labor to sport. As industry replaced workhorses, equestrian culture transformed. Horse racing flourished in places like Lexington and Dubai. Events like the Kentucky Derby became global spectacles. show jumping, dressage, and polo-turned horsemanship into sport. The horse remained powerful, but now in arenas rather than battlefields. The frontier fades. By the early 1900s, mechanization reshaped agriculture as well. Tractors replaced draft teams. Combustion engines outperformed even the strongest breeds. The phrase horsepower survived, ironically, as a measurement for machines that rendered horses obsolete. It was both tribute and farewell, a quiet, stable. Imagine a stable in the early 20th century. An old cavalry horse stands at rest. No armor, no saddle, no battle ahead. Outside, an automobile sputters past. The world moves differently now. Faster, louder, mechanical. But inside the stable, the rhythm of breathing remains the same as it was on ancient steppes. The bond between species has not vanished. It has simply softened. In the next batch, we will explore how horses survived the machine age, the rise of modern equestrian sports, wild horse conservation, therapy horses, and emotional healing, and why humanity still feels drawn to these animals. The engines roar. Factories hum. Cars crowd highways. Airplanes cross oceans in hours. The age of horsepower, the living kind, seems over. And yet, in quiet fields, along mountain trails, inside wooden barns, warmed by afternoon light, horses still stand beside us. Not as tools, not as weapons, but as companions. The story did not end when machines arrived. It simply changed its rhythm. From battlefield to showground, as cavalry faded after World War I and World War II, horses gradually transitioned into sport and ceremony. Military parades still featured mounted units, polished saddles, braided manes, but their role was symbolic. Meanwhile, equestrian competition grew rapidly. Dressage, show jumping, and eventing became Olympic sports. Precision replaced combat, harmony replaced force. At the Summer Olympics, riders and horses from around the world now demonstrate something ancient yet refined: trust, communication through subtle shifts of weight. A partnership visible in silence. The battlefield was gone, but the bond remained. The racing world, if war once showcased speed, racing now celebrated it. The thunder of hooves moved from fields of battle to racetracks. Events like the Kentucky Derby in the United States, Royal Ascot in the United Kingdom, and the Dubai World Cup became international spectacles. Breeding programs refined bloodlines for stamina and acceleration. Thoroughbreds became living athletes, their muscles rippling under bright stadium lights. Yet even here, echoes of ancient steppe horses remain. Speed still inspires awe. When a racehorse surges forward, it reminds us of something primal: the beauty of motion. The cowboy endures. Though the mechanized ranch replaced much mounted labor, horses never fully vanished from cattle work. Across the American West and in parts of South America and Australia, working ranch horses still move among herds. In regions like Texas and Argentina, mounted riders remain part of agricultural culture. The modern cowboy may use trucks and helicopters, but when navigating rough terrain or guiding cattle through tight spaces, a horse remains unmatched. Sometimes, tradition survives because it works. Therapy and healing. In recent decades, horses have entered an entirely new role. Healers. Equine-assisted therapy programs have grown around the world. Individuals coping with trauma, anxiety, PTSD, and developmental challenges work alongside horses in structured environments. Why horses? Because they are sensitive. They respond to body language. They mirror emotion. They require calm leadership. For veterans returning from war, children with autism, or people recovering from grief, interaction with horses can create breakthroughs where words fail. 1,000 years ago, horses carried soldiers into battle. Today, they help those same soldiers heal. History turns gently. Wild horses, symbols of freedom. Despite centuries of domestication, not all horses live under saddle. Across open lands, feral horse populations survive. Descendants of animals once owned, now free. In the American West, the Mustang roams public lands. The Bureau of Land Management oversees wild horse populations, balancing conservation with environmental pressures. The image of wild horses racing across desert plains remains powerful in popular imagination. They symbolize independence, untamed spirit, movement without restraint, and yet their survival is complex, shaped by politics, ecology, and human debate. Even in freedom, horses remain tied to us. Cultural memory. Horses have never left our stories. From children's books to epic films, they remain central figures. In literature, they often symbolize loyalty or wildness. In cinema, sweeping shots of riders crossing landscapes still stir something ancient in viewers. Consider how often heroes ride horses in fantasy worlds, from medieval legends to modern blockbusters. The association between horses and courage is deeply embedded in human culture. They are not just animals. They are metaphors. Cities without horses, and with them again. At the height of industrialization, horses nearly vanished from cities. But in some places, they returned not as laborers, but as living reminders of history. Mounted police units patrol urban parks. Carriage rides carry tourists through historic districts. In cities like New York City and Vienna, horses still move along streets, slower than traffic, but somehow more timeless. Critics debate their place in modern infrastructure. Supporters argue they preserve tradition. Either way, their presence sparks conversation. Even now, horses shape public life. The science of the horse. Modern research has deepened our understanding of equine intelligence and emotion. Studies show horses recognize human facial expressions, remember individual people, form social bonds within herds, experience stress and relaxation patterns similar to ours. Science confirms what riders long suspected. Horses are perceptive and relational. The ancient partnership was not accidental. It worked because both species could adapt to each other. A changing ethics. With greater knowledge comes responsibility. Modern equestrian communities increasingly focus on welfare, humane training methods, and ethical breeding practices. Where earlier eras often relied on force, many trainers today emphasize communication and consent-based approaches. The narrative has shifted from domination to collaboration. This reflects broader societal changes, a growing awareness of animal sentience and rights. Horses, once tools of empire, now inspire discussions about compassion. The rural quiet, away from competition arenas and city debates, something simpler continues. A child learning to ride for the first time. An elderly farmer brushing a retired draft horse. A quiet trail ride at dusk. In these moments, history feels close. The same animal that once carried messengers across the Persian Empire, that thundered beneath nights in medieval Europe, that crossed the plains with the Comanche, now lowers its head gently into a human hand. The scale of history narrows to a single breath. What machines cannot replace? Cars are faster. Planes are stronger. Tractors are more efficient, but none of them respond to a whisper. None of them sense nervousness in your posture. None of them choose to trust you. The horse offers something machines cannot. Reciprocity. It does not function automatically. It participates. That difference matters. The sound that remains. Even in a digital age, the rhythm of hooves still resonates in the human imagination. Listen closely. Clip-clop, breath, leather creak. It is the soundtrack of migration, empire, trade, exploration, and childhood memory. For thousands of years, humanity moved at that rhythm. We evolved alongside it. A world forever altered. If horses had never been domesticated, empires might have remained smaller, trade routes slower, cultural exchange delayed, agricultural productivity limited, entire military strategies impossible. Horses accelerated history. They compressed distance. They connected continents. They carried ideas faster than human legs ever could. And even after engines replaced them, their influence remained embedded in language, sport, and memory. We still measure engine power in horsepower. A quiet tribute, dusk in the pasture. Imagine twilight settling over a pasture. A modern world hums faintly in the distance. Traffic, electricity, distant city lights. But here, there is only grass shifting in wind. A horse lifts its head, ears turning, eyes reflecting fading sunlight. For 5,000 years, Humans have looked into those eyes and seen strength, fear, loyalty, and freedom. Fewer still have walked beside us for
Shields, unhurried, watchful. They no longer carry the weight of empire, but they still carry something else, meaning.
The myths are powerful. The history is vast, but beneath legend and empire, beneath cavalry charges and golden chariots, there is something quieter: muscle, bone, breath, evolution. To understand how horses changed humanity, we must now understand how horses themselves were shaped by nature and by us. Born to run, the biology of speed. Modern horses belong to a lineage refined by open grasslands. Over millions of years, natural selection favored animals that could detect danger quickly, accelerate rapidly, sustain long-distance running. The shift from multi-toed forest dwellers to single-hoofed runners was revolutionary. A single large hoof acts like a spring-loaded structure, reducing weight at the end of the limb and increasing efficiency. Their long legs increase stride length. Their powerful hindquarters generate propulsion. Their large lungs and heart deliver oxygen efficiently during intense exertion. In evolutionary terms, horses became specialists. They are not built for climbing trees, not built for hiding underground. They are built to run. And that biological gift made them irresistible to humans. The human hand in evolution. Domestication changed everything. Once humans began selectively breeding horses, natural evolution was joined by artificial selection. People chose horses for strength, temperament, endurance, size, speed. Over centuries, distinct breeds emerged, shaped by geography, climate, and cultural need. The heavy draft horses of medieval Europe were bred for pulling plows and armored knights. Desert horses were bred for stamina and heat tolerance. Small, hardy ponies evolved in mountainous or windswept regions. Humans became co-authors of the horse's genetic story. The Arabian legacy. Few breeds have influenced global horse genetics as profoundly as the Arabian horse. Originating in the Arabian Peninsula, these horses were prized for endurance, intelligence, and loyalty. Bedouin tribes often kept them close to tents, treating them almost as family members. Arabian bloodlines later shaped many modern breeds, including the thoroughbred. Their distinctive dished face and high-tail carriage remain instantly recognizable. More importantly, their stamina helped define long-distance riding traditions across continents. The thoroughbred and the pursuit of speed. In 17th and 18th century England, selective breeding intensified around racing. By crossing imported Arabians with local mares, breeders created the thoroughbred. These horses were engineered for acceleration and competitive speed. Modern horse racing traces directly to this careful manipulation of bloodlines. But breeding for speed comes with trade-offs. Thoroughbreds are often more injury-prone due to lighter bone structures and intense physical demands. This raises difficult ethical questions. When humans shape an animal for performance, what responsibility follows? The power of the draft horse. Not all breeding favored speed. In agricultural societies, power mattered more. Breeds like the Clydesdale horse and the Shire horse were developed for immense strength. These giants could pull heavy loads across muddy fields and cobblestone streets. Before tractors, they powered economies. Their broad backs and feathered legs became symbols of steady labor. When industrialization reduced demand for draft horses, many populations declined dramatically. Some breeds nearly disappeared. The genetic bottleneck. Modern breeding practices, while producing remarkable specialization, have also created challenges. Closed stud books and narrow bloodlines increase risk of inherited diseases. In some breeds, genetic diversity has shrunk significantly. Scientists now use DNA analysis to better understand lineage, health risks, and population stability. The same species that once roamed freely across continents now depends on careful management to avoid genetic fragility. The irony is striking. The animal that once shaped empires now requires human stewardship to survive and balance. Wild horses and ecological debate. Wild and feral horse populations exist in several regions, including the American West and parts of Australia. In the United States, wild mustangs are managed by the Bureau of Land Management. The debate is complex. Supporters argue wild horses are living symbols of national heritage. Ecologists counter that unmanaged herds can strain fragile ecosystems, competing with native species for limited resources. Roundups, adoption programs, and fertility control measures attempt to strike balance. The conversation reflects a deeper tension. Are horses wildlife, livestock, cultural icons? They are, in some sense, all three. Horses in a warming world. Climate change introduces new uncertainties. Rising temperatures affect pasture quality. Drought reduces available grazing land. Extreme weather events threaten both domestic and wild populations. Some regions may become less suitable for traditional horse breeding. Others may adapt. Throughout history, horses have shown resilience. But modern environmental pressures are unprecedented in scale. Their future will depend heavily on human choices. Ethics in sport. Horse racing, show jumping, dressage, and other equestrian sports remain popular worldwide, but scrutiny has increased. Concerns include overbreeding, performance-enhancing drugs, injury rates, post-career retirement for sport horses. High-profile incidents have sparked public debates. Regulatory bodies are implementing stricter welfare standards. The question underlying these discussions is ancient yet urgent. Is the partnership still mutual? Or has competition tipped the balance? The future of equestrian sport will likely depend on maintaining trust, not only between horse and rider, but between sport and society. The science of emotion. Modern neuroscience has revealed fascinating insights into equine cognition. Horses can recognize individual human faces, differentiate emotional expressions, remember past interactions, form long-term social bonds. Their brains are structured for herd dynamics, constant awareness of subtle shifts in posture and mood. When humans interact calmly and consistently, horses respond. When humans are tense or unpredictable, horses react accordingly. This sensitivity explains their effectiveness in therapy settings. It also reinforces a central truth of this entire history. The horse-human relationship works because it is relational, not mechanical. Technology meets tradition. Interestingly, technology is not entirely replacing horses. It is reshaping how we care for them. Advances in veterinary medicine allow sophisticated imaging for injuries, improved surgical procedures, nutritional optimization, genetic testing. Tracking devices monitor health and movement patterns. Even artificial intelligence is being used to analyze gait and detect early signs of lameness. The same technological revolution that ended the horse's dominance in labor may help extend its lifespan and well-being. History folds back on itself. Could horses disappear? It seems unlikely. Globally, horse populations remain substantial, though concentrated in specific regions. Their economic role has narrowed, but their cultural and recreational value remains strong. Unlike oxen or camels, horses hold a unique symbolic status in many societies. They are unlikely to vanish entirely, but their numbers, roles, and distribution will continue to evolve, as they always have. The long arc, from forest-dwelling ancestors to desert racers, from chariot teams in ancient Egypt to cavalry beneath Genghis Khan. From draft horses in medieval villages to Olympic arenas, the horse has been reshaped by environment, by culture, by ambition, and yet, in essence, it remains the same creature. Alert, powerful, social, swift. We changed them, they changed us. Evolution, in this case, ran both directions. A field at dawn. Picture a quiet pasture at dawn, mist rising, a small herd grazing, no armor, no saddle, no bridle, just horses, as they once were. They flick their ears toward distant sound. They shift weight gently from hoof to hoof. For millions of years, they survived by listening, by running, by staying together. And for 5,000 of those years, they allowed humans to join them. That allowance shaped the world. About what happens inside a human being when they climb onto a horse. The first ride. Imagine the first time a human successfully rode. No saddle, no stirrups, no instruction manual, just instinct. The horse shifts beneath you, alive, thinking, responsive. Every movement matters. Lean too far, and balance disappears. Tighten too suddenly, and the horse reacts. Riding requires adjustment. You cannot dominate gravity. You must align with it. That requirement may be why riding feels transformative. It forces awareness, balance, and trust. Modern riders often describe a moment when horse and human begin to move as one. Stride matches breath. Hands soften. Reins loosen slightly. Communication becomes nearly invisible. The horse feels subtle shifts in weight. The rider senses tension in muscle and spine. This is not control in the mechanical sense. It is dialogue, and that dialogue changes people. To ride well, you must regulate your own emotion. Anxiety transfers instantly. Frustration stiffens posture. Fear travels down the reins. The horse reflects what you bring. In that reflection, riders often learn self-mastery, the psychology of height. There was also something psychological about elevation. For thousands of years, mounted individuals literally saw the world differently. From horseback, horizons expand, distance compresses, movement feels fluid. Anthropologists suggest that this elevated perspective subtly influenced leadership and identity. Mounted leaders looked larger. They appeared commanding. They experienced motion as power. Even today, a child riding for the first time often smiles with astonishment. The world feels wider from a horse's back. Why horses calm us? In recent decades, equine-assisted therapy has expanded across continents. Programs working with trauma survivors, veterans, and children with developmental challenges report something consistent. Horses regulate human emotion. Their steady breathing and rhythmic gait activate calming responses in the nervous system. Unlike machines, horses are warm. Their heartbeats are audible. Their presence is grounding. Studies show that interacting with horses can lower stress hormones and increase feelings of trust and safety. It is not mystical. It is biological. For millennia, our species synchronized movement with theirs. Perhaps our nervous systems still remember. Herd lessons. Horses are herd animals. They survive through cooperation and hierarchy balanced with awareness. Within a herd, leaders move others through subtle cues. Conflict is often resolved through posture, not violence. Alertness is shared. When humans spend time around horses, they witness these dynamics. Many trainers note that horses respond best to clear, calm leadership, not aggression. Too much force creates resistance. Too little direction creates confusion. The lesson extends beyond the stable. Leadership, whether of animals or people, requires steadiness. The philosophy of partnership. For much of history, the horse-human relationship was unequal. Humans bred, bought, sold, and commanded. Yet successful horsemanship has always required cooperation. Even medieval knights understood that a terrified warhorse endangered its rider. Nomadic steppe cultures often treated horses with reverence because survival depended on their well-being. In modern philosophy of animal studies, horses occupy a unique place. They are neither wild predators nor passive livestock. They are large, powerful beings who choose daily to accept human guidance. That choice is profound. It challenges the idea that history is purely human-driven. Without horses, human ambition would have stalled. The partnership was mutual, even if not always fair. Modern riders, across the world, people continue to seek horses, not for survival, but for meaning. In rural pastures in Ireland, children learn to canter along stone-lined fields. In desert endurance races in United Arab Emirates, riders test stamina beneath vast skies. In mountain villages in Mongolia, horses remain woven into daily life, much as they were centuries ago. Different cultures, different purposes, yet the same quiet exchange, hand to neck, breath to breath. The rider's responsibility. With intimacy comes obligation. Modern riders carry the weight of history. They inherit centuries of triumph and exploitation. Ethical horsemanship now emphasizes proper nutrition, adequate rest, gentle training methods, retirement care. Many equestrian communities are re-examining traditions once accepted without question. Bits, spurs, whips, tools that once symbolized authority are now debated. The conversation continues to evolve. The question remains simple. Can the partnership remain honorable? The slow ride. There is a particular kind of ride that feels almost timeless. A quiet trail. Late afternoon light. No competition. No audience. No urgency. Just a steady rhythm of hooves. In these moments, centuries collapse. You are not a modern person carrying a smartphone in your pocket. You are simply a human moving across land the way your ancestors did. Wind touches your face. The horse chooses each step. Time stretches. It is perhaps the closest we come to understanding how deeply horses shaped our species. For thousands of years, this was how distance felt. This was how travel sounded. This was how progress moved. The mirror effect. One of the most powerful aspects of riding is reflection. Horses mirror inconsistency. If you hesitate, they hesitate. If you rush, they rush. If you calm yourself, they soften. Psychologists working in equine therapy often describe horses as emotional biofeedback systems. You cannot hide from them. They respond to truth. This may explain why riders often describe personal growth. Horses demand presence, and presence is rare in a distracted world. The child and the pony, across cultures. Many children's first large animal experience is with a pony, small enough to approach, large enough to feel powerful. The memory often stays for life, perhaps because it marks a threshold moment. The realization that strength can be gentle, that fear can become partnership, that another species can carry you forward. These early encounters plant something enduring. Even people who never ride again often retain a soft spot for horses. The bond leaves an imprint. Could the bond fade? In a future of autonomous vehicles and virtual reality, will horses still matter? Probably not in the ways they once did. They will not carry armies. They will not power plows. They will not outrun trains. But meaning is not erased by obsolescence. If anything, rarity may increase value. As daily life becomes more digital, tactile experiences grow precious. The warmth of a horse's neck. Nightfall in a stable. A stable at night is quiet, soft shifting in straw, an occasional snort. Moonlight through slats in wood. For thousands of years, humans have slept near horses in camps, castles, frontier barns. Their breathing once meant safety. An alert horse sensed danger before people did. Even now, standing in that quiet, something ancient stirs, a sense of continuity, of shared time. We have traced horses through evolution, empire, myth, industry, psychology. We have followed the horse across forests and steppes, across battlefields and racetracks, through myth, empire, psychology, and pasture. Now we arrive at the quiet horizon of the story, not with thunder, but with reflection. To understand how horses changed humanity, we must imagine something impossible, a world without them. If horses had never been tamed, picture early civilizations rising without mounted transport, no fast couriers, no cavalry, no horse-drawn plows, increasing agricultural yield. Empires like the Mongol Empire might never have expanded across Eurasia. Vast territories, such as the Roman Empire, would have struggled to coordinate across distance. Trade routes, like the Silk Road, would have moved slower, perhaps changing the timing of cultural exchange between East and West. Without horses, communication delays could alter wars. Borders might settle differently. Technological diffusion might stall. Human history would still unfold, but it would move at walking speed. The horse compressed geography, and geography shapes destiny. Some changes are obvious. Cavalry charges, chariots, plows. Others are subtle. Language itself carries equine echoes. We speak of horsepower when measuring engines, reining in emotions, bridling anger. Dark horse candidates. Straight from the horse's mouth, our metaphors remember what our daily lives have forgotten. Even when we no longer ride, we speak as though we do. Mobility determines power. Nomadic cultures of the Eurasian steppe reshaped entire continents because they could move quickly on horseback. The campaigns of Genghis Khan redrew maps from China to Eastern Europe. In North America, mounted plains nations like the Comanche shifted regional dominance for generations. In medieval Europe, the mounted knight defined feudal land ownership. Territory often belonged to those who could reach it and defend it fastest. Speed was sovereignty, and speed had hooves. Before engines, cities pulsed with horses. In 19th century New York City, tens of thousands of horses moved streetcars, delivery wagons, and private carriages. Stables filled entire blocks. Urban planning revolved around animal care, feed supply, manure removal, veterinary access. When automobiles replaced horses, infrastructure changed radically. Garages replaced stables. Fuel stations replaced feed stores. The transition from horse-powered cities to engine-powered ones was not just technological. It reshaped urban design. Horses once defined how far you could commute, how much you could transport, how quickly you could respond. They were urban infrastructure long before electricity. Close your eyes and imagine different eras. Bronze Age chariots in ancient Egypt, medieval knights charging across Europe, Mongol riders crossing open plains, cowboys herding cattle across Texas grasslands. The constant is rhythm, hoofbeats. For 5 millennia, that rhythm accompanied trade, migration, conquest, and exploration. It was the background music of history. Only in the past century has it grown faint. When engines arrived, they replaced function but not meaning. Tractors outpulled draft horses. Cars overran carruajes. Tanks overtook cavalry. But machines never replaced the relational element. A horse feels. A horse chooses. A horse responds. That difference ensured survival, not as tool, but as companion. Today, horses exist primarily in sport, recreation, therapy, cultural ceremony, select agricultural traditions. Their economic centrality faded. Their emotional significance did not. Visit almost any rural fence line where a horse grazes. Sooner or later, someone will slow down. A child will reach out. An adult will pause. There is something about a horse's presence that draws attention. Size without predation. Power without cruelty. Alertness without hostility. In a world increasingly mediated by screens, horses remain tactile and immediate. They demand presence, and presence is rare. Over 5,000 years, humans shaped horse breeds to suit need, but horses shaped us too. They encouraged long-distance trade networks, mounted warfare strategies, agricultural intensification, cross-cultural contact, mythological imagination. They accelerated globalization before the word existed. Without horses, the timing of history shifts. The Renaissance might arrive later. Colonial expansion unfolds differently. Even technological innovation changes pace. The horse did not merely assist humanity, it amplified it. When the 20th century began, many believed horses would fade into irrelevance, yet they persist. In Olympic arenas, on mountain trails, across Mongolian grasslands, in therapy centers, helping veterans recover from war. The role is quieter now, but perhaps quieter roles are more sustainable. For the first time in their shared history, humans do not need horses to survive, which means that when we choose them, it is for connection. And chosen relationships carry a different weight than required ones. The story ends where it began. Open land, grass bending in wind. A herd stands silhouetted against fading light. No armor, no banners, no empire rising behind them. Just horses. They flick their tails. They shift their weight. They graze, unaware of the maps redrawn beneath their hooves, unaware of the empires they carried, unaware of the myths they inspired. For them, there is only the present moment. For us, there is memory. Horses changed humanity in ways both visible and invisible. They compressed continents, carried civilizations, fueled agriculture, reshaped warfare, inspired mythology, influenced language, taught partnership. Few other animals have altered the trajectory of a species so profoundly. The story of humanity cannot be told without them. And though engines now dominate the highways, somewhere in the quiet, in a field at dawn, in a stable at night, on a trail beneath stars, the ancient rhythm continues. Hoof, breath, step, history still echoes there.